In ancient Rome, it was the rule that slaves could be abused in any way. In fact, if a free man was accused of a crime, it was highly recommended that his slaves be tortured instead, often to death, so that a verdict could be made. Even so, the most powerful people in Rome still tortured the free men and women of their land. In ancient Rome, there were always holes in the rules, and the elite masters took advantage of all of them. Sewn into a donkey. If you want to find cruel and strange ways to torture people, all you have to do is look at old Rome. Take for example a torture that both Apuleius in The Golden and Lucian in Lucius or the Ass wrote about. A donkey would be killed, its stomach would be cut open, and its guts would be taken out. The accused was then stripped of his or her clothes and put inside the animal's stomach. The accused's stomach was sewn shut, leaving only his head outside. This kept him from suffocating but made his pain last longer. The dead donkey was left out in the sun. It would start to rot, and the heat would cook the person still alive inside. Maggots would crawl all over the person on trial, and vultures would pick at the rotting meat of the animal. The tortured person was glad to die, but it took a long time. Fed to wild hogs. St. Gregory wrote about a horrible torture that the people of Heliopolis did to young women when they were ruled by the Romans. Any girl who was going to have to go through this torture was given to the gladiators first. When the young woman was no longer a virgin, she was stripped in public and had her belly cut open so her insides could be seen. She was stuffed with handfuls of grain, sewn back up, and then given to wild pigs. Then she would be torn apart, cut off. In ancient Rome, the more important you were, the more people you could kill without getting in trouble. For instance, the prince could make love to anyone he wanted. A general could try to get with a lieutenant or a regular person, and troops could go after regular people. It was against the rules to move up the social ladder. If a regular person tried to mate with a soldier who did not want to, they would be castrated in public. If the soldier let a regular person pierce him on purpose, he would be disemboweled in public. With these rules and true love between men, things got very confusing. It was easy for anyone to say that a man broke ranks or willingly let a man of lower standing touch him. Penacula penaculi, which means penalty of the sack, was also used for the first time by the Romans. The offender was tied up in a simple leather sack and thrown into a river to drown. The goal was to kill him. Most people agree that pinulae was first used in Titus Livy History of Rome. In it, Livy talks about how for killing his mother in 101 BC, Marcus Publius Malus was put in a sack and thrown out to sea. Livy's story of what happened does not seem as bad as later versions of the punishment which used real animals. According to Emperor Justinian rules from AD 530, this is not execution by sword or fire or any other normal form of punishment. Instead, the criminal is sewn up in a sack with a dog, a rooster, a viper, and an ape. And this miserable prison is thrown into the sea or a river. The ancient Romans rarely gave this sentence. When they did, it was usually for killing a parent or other close relative. Tortured senator. Caligula was just as mean as Tiberius was. At one point, he cut open a senator. The senator lived, and Caligula told people to cut out his eyes. After that, his innards were taken out with hot pincers. To make things even worse, the senator was cut in half and pulled apart. Romans thought that death was not a punishment, but a way to be free. Torture was a form of justice, and people could only die after a certain amount of pain and fear. Nailed into barrels. Some people were meant to suffer longer than others before the sweet relief of death. Christians were abused in the worst ways possible by Emperor Domitian. One of the most disgusting ways Christians were tortured was by being covered in honey and milk. The victim was then tied to a barrel and fed food that was full of parasites. The bugs ate the victim insides, and the body started to rot inside the barrel. After being tortured for about 2 weeks, the person would finally die and become a Christian hero. Buried alive, Emperor Nero enjoyed putting people in graves while they were still living. He saved this sentence almost entirely for Vestal virgins who broke their promise to stay pure. One story says that Nero made Rubria, a goddess, sleep with him. She was put in a small cave and left to die of hunger as her sentence. As part of another form of torture that Nero approved of, the person who was accused dug his own grave. After the hole was dug, a stake was put in it. The guilty person was then tied up and thrown into a grave. If he had done something small, he would be pushed until the stake went through his heart. Whoever was found guilty of a terrible crime was pushed so that the stake killed him. Then he was either left to die in terrible pain or buried alive, eaten through the middle, as was the case with the pot torture. People who did cruel things to others often used animals for this act of abuse. A rat, a dog, or a cat that was starving was put in a small cauldron. Then the mouth of the pot was tied to the accused's stomach. The person in charge of putting people to death would hold a flame to the back of the pot to make the inside very hot. The animal would get scared and run away. The only soft ground it could find to dig its way out was through the accused's stomach. Basket. One strange way to torture someone was to take off all their clothes and put them in a big loosely made basket. The basket was then hung from a tree with a big busy beehive. The bees got mad quickly, and the person in the basket died from being stung. The accused was supposed to go through as much pain as possible. But there were times when someone who was being tortured this way died quickly because they were allergic to bee stings. Crucifixion. The Romans in the past liked to watch crucifixions. At one time, it was the most common way to harm and kill a huge number of slaves. The person being punished was not always nailed to a cross. The guilty was sometimes stripped naked, had his head covered, and was tied to a cross or fork. Then he was beaten with a whip sometimes until he died. If the accused was not meant to die from being flogged over and over again, the next step was to nail his hands to the crossbeam. Then his feet were nailed to a post that had been put in the ground. He could be left there to die slowly, or his thighs could be broken to make his death happen faster. In some cases, the person being charged may be hung upside down from a post. Sometimes the accused was killed by having the post driven through his or her private parts. There was no one set way to crucify someone. Each person who did it in their own way. We hope you liked this video. Subscribe to the channel if you are a history addict, and please let us know about the civilization or time period we should talk about.